Hello everyone and welcome back to Corndog Creates. My name is Corndog and apologies for the long delay between videos. Unfortunately, life kind of got in the way and took up a lot of my time, but I'm back with another diorama for you guys. For this video, I had a couple figures that I bought a while back that I wanted to do something with, so I opened them up and started working on a scene for them. I had a couple plaques that I got from a thrift store that at some point had some 3D looking designs on them, but they've mostly fell apart, so I picked the smaller one for this project and set the other aside for a later date. Both of these things had hooks on the back for hanging on the wall, so I took some pliers and pried them off the back so it would lay flush on the table. The next thing I wanted to do was build up the terrain of the diorama, so I traced a rough shape of the plaque onto a piece of foam board and cut it out with a box cutter. Then I flipped the plaque upside down and used the pencil to trace the shape onto the piece of foam and cut it out as well. Once I had one piece, I used it to trace and cut out another piece and peeled the paper off of both sides of the foam and glued them to the base. Once those were in place, it was time to build my giant his home. I took some foam blocks and used him to trace out a cave shape into him. When I had the general shape I wanted, I used my box cutter to cut off the corners and the bigger chunks of the foam before coming back later and smoothing it out a little more. Then I glued the top half to the bottom half and glued both pieces to the base. When everything was dry, I used my box cutter to shape the foam and trim it down to fit closer to the size of the base before using it to bevel the edges of the white foam and carving out the inside of the cave. Then I used my X-Acto knife to cut a couple pieces out of the foam base to give the terrain a bit of randomness before using my hot glue gun to add a couple foam rocks that I made during my last video and ended up not using. Now that all of the carving was finished, it was time to add some texture and a bit of protection to the foam. I made a mixture of paint, Mod Podge, and spackle and spread it around the entire base. This was going pretty well until I got to the green foam. For some reason, the mixture wanted to ball up and roll off of this particular foam, so I ended up mostly using my hands to spread it around that area so that I could make sure it was actually going on and staying in place. Once everything was covered and while it was still drying, I added some rocks around different places as well. After everything was dry and giving the whole thing a spray of black primer spray paint, I used my airbrush to give it a coat of a bluish gray paint followed by a coat of a light gray color. Next I added some red, yellow, and blue washes around the whole base to give it some color variation. Then I gave the whole thing a dry brush of a parchment white color. I ended up being a little heavy-handed and covered up most of the wash work that I just did. But I just pushed forward nonetheless, and I'll figure something out later to make it work. Before I started painting the figures, I wanted to get rid of as much of the bases that they came connected to as I could. So I used my Dremel tool to shave them down as close to their feet as I was comfortable getting before moving on to the painting. For the giant, I used a dark brown for their club, the handle of their axe, and the fur of their waist. I then used the lighter brown color for the leather around their axe and legs and the belt holding their fur, before giving their hair a coat of an orange color and an off-white color to the bones on their belt and the spikes on their club. For their skin, I ended up going with a gray that was slightly darker than the primer they came with. For the soldiers, I wanted them all to have the same color scheme so they look like they're from the same unit. So I split their armor pieces between a pavement black color and a king's gold color. Then I gave all of their skin a coat of off-white before using the same light brown color from earlier for their belts, straps, and gloves, and the darker brown for their boots and sheaths before giving their weapons a coat of silver paint. Next, I wanted to add some things to the background of the diorama, so I grabbed some plastic skeletons that I got from the dollar store and cut a few pieces off. I tried to modify them a little so that they didn't look so much like human bones. These bones were way too big for the scale that I'm building, so I wanted to emulate some kind of creature that might have been the same size or bigger than the giant, but they were still able to take them down. The last thing I wanted to do before putting everyone in their places was to try and undo some of the mistake I made earlier by adding some extra washes around the base to bring back the color. I added some blues and greens to the rocks and cave area to make them look a little moldy from being constantly damp before adding a brown and black wash over the whole thing to bring down the brightness and blend everything together. Then I added some brown and black wash to all of the figures, making sure to wipe off any excess with a paper towel so that it mostly collects in the recesses. To add a little extra color and realism to the diorama, I added in some pre-made shrubs around the area. Once that was finished, the only thing left to do was to glue all of the figures into their places. And that, my friends, is my cave battle diorama. Thank you guys so much for coming in to watch the video. I hope you all enjoyed it and come back to join me in the next one. If you did like it, make sure to give it a thumbs up because it really helps me out. Also, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you can see when all of my future videos come out. If any of you are interested, I'm trying to resurrect an old gaming Discord channel that I made a while back to convert it into one for here so that you guys can use it to chat with me and each other and also be able to make suggestions for future builds. Link will be in the description for anyone who wants to join. Thank you all for watching. My name is Corndog, and see you all in the next video.